Like, okay, let's flip to the G2 topic then. Right, Wicked, the day that we're filming this was when I wouldn't even say leaked, because like to me it's like leaked implies that you know. I basically just reported on what I would say is a credible rumor based on the sources I had, right? Which is that G2 will indeed make some moves in the offseason. It sounded to me, by the way, like it's like they potentially are just going to blow the whole thing up and do who the fuck knows. Like it sounds to me like everything is on the table here. It could be like one or two players, maybe they just keep one or two players. But the main one that I heard was basically going to happen is that they're going to sell Rekkles to someone. Obviously, who it is yet to be determined, because you can't do that till the offseason unless you agree to let the team talk to them now. And I assume G2 will try and get as many offers because you can potentially sell that player for a lot of money. Of course, he's been an MVP even this year, champion many times, one of the greatest players from Europe. But the issue is that I basically put it this way. Part of the reason I went so quickly with that rumor is because I also sort of get the vibe that, like, as usual, fucking Spin Master Rekkles will imply like, no, I chose. It's like Elements. I chose to leave. It's like, nah, motherfucker, you didn't choose anything, including what Thorin types and hits the old tweet button on. So, Spoons, this is a pretty blockbuster move. As I've just said, he was literally the MVP of the fucking spring split. And when they made this team, I'm going to remind people of this. When they made this team, the Reddit take was G2 have ruined the LEC, they cannot lose, and nobody can possibly contend with them. Because listen, on paper they had already like the greatest team ever, and then they added, in theory, the best pure ADC. And by the way, I even generally agreed with the team. I didn't agree with the idea they ruined the LEC, obviously. So Spoons, where do you go on this one? Like, first of all, thoughts on the Rekkles move. If this indeed did happen, if they sold him, what would you think of that? Bad move? Good move?
Well, I'm just gonna come out gate and say it would probably be a bad move. I don't disagree that something has to happen within G2, right? Obviously, you know, if you go in and just listen to their comms specifically, I think if you listen to Rekkles talking, like he's basically trying to fill in the Perks role, right? He was trying to get the team under control and focused for the next match, and Yanko's just yelling out his ass. So I feel like G2 at this point is really a team where, let's use a Yamato cannon analogy, right? They have all the ingredients there, but there's no chef to cook the broth. And that's the real issue with them, is that they have a team with 5 players that can make plays, but there isn't a concerted effort, nobody to really call the shots to go for those plays. And at the start of the season, at the start of this year, that was my main question going into it, because Rekkles himself has said he doesn't like to be a leader. And Carlos has just basically kicked out G2's de facto leader in game, right? So at this point in time, there's no real leadership within G2. So I agree that something has to happen. And that would either be, number one, kicking someone out in replacing them with maybe a mechanically less skilled player, but someone who can step up in-game as an in-game leader. Or number two, which I think is more unlikely, one of the G2 players, maybe Caps, maybe Wonder, maybe Yanko's just stepping up and saying, okay, I'm taking the reins right now. But the reason I think that's so unlikely is because, you know, G2 is a team that is super temperamental, and it's really hard to get these players under control. And I think Perks is like the one player, I can't even think of an alternative, right? The one player who could have really got this roster under control. Not even Grabs, not even their coach can get these players under control. What is Rekkles or anybody else on this roster going to do, right?
What do you think they do, Wicked? Like, what do you think of this move first?
So if the move is true, I think it's a great move. I think it's a really smart move, because think about it. Rekkles, probably one of the most popular players, and
easy.
I don't think he's extremely perfect fit for G2, right? They need an explosive AD carry. So he's not a perfect fit in my eyes. He's really good, but he doesn't really fit the team. And he's super popular, so it's a lot of money, right? So I think it's just a very smart move for the money. Doesn't really make sense not to do it if they get a good offer for him. And they can just fill in a different AD carry that's actually explosive. Like, we had the same problem when we picked up Rekkles in the past. We picked up Rekkles, we had Taps before, everybody thought Taps was worse, but we figured out that Taps was actually way better for our team because he was explosive, and we needed engage. We had Froggen, who was kind of passive, we had Rekkles, who was kind of passive to some extent, and then we ended up in games doing absolutely nothing. We just sat there and was like, okay, what's going to happen? Where Taps often into because he went in first, but that's what we needed, right? So I think G2 needs an aggressive player. I think Rekkles is very valuable in the terms of money, and it just makes sense to me.
Yeah, go on.
Let me just want to jump in here, and just because I realized I didn't actually justify my by saying that it was a bad decision. I think, you know, just based on Well, I think that, first of all, if you want to look for aggressive play, it's more worth it to sign someone in a different role, maybe in the jungle or the top laner. I feel like, just getting Rekkles in for 1 year and saying he's not it, let's cut him out, is not really the best move to do. I'm not saying that, if they do it, I will disagree, but I will say that if they just keep this roster, even if they just keep the entire roster and say, let's go for another split, another year maybe, and see how it pans out, I think that I would not disagree with that either.
Mm-hmm.
Right, here's my angle. The problem is, I actually think either move is correct and can work, or not work, depending on how you do it. Like, for example, one of the reasons I actually thought this team would work, if people remember way back, obviously I don't expect you guys to, but people watch the shows, my original take on G2 was I also agree this team should actually win all the splits, because I even think if they just forget their old playing style, which they won't be able to replicate, obviously, and they just become like a normal European League of Legends team, and like, right, I'm an ADC, you are a mid laner, the joke is they should have been able to play standard, and actually, they have the team, which, if anything, are the ones that I always get mad about Rekkles being on, because it's when people tell me Rekkles is the best, but then he has like the best solo lanes that like dominate every time. So I thought to myself, the reason this is genius is now Rekkles can do that shit where he just farms in lane while the support roams, and then all you need is they have the best solo laners in Europe, Wunder and Caps, they just go off. So my comment was, if this works in G2, it'll basically be Wunder and Caps like playing against each other, see who the MVP of the fucking league is. The problem is, everyone knows Wunder just never held up. So unfortunately, I think that's made people think like Rekkles cannot work in G2. If you took Wunder out and you could put in like a true carry top laner, man, this team could have done a lot of shit. This team could have done a lot of stuff this year. So I think that's one option right there. Just if you just kept him, apparently they're not going to, and you just got a really good carry top laner. Like, put it this way, if someone thinks visually now, imagine this year's the same, but we just have Alfari instead of Wunder. I'd love to see that G2 team play. They'd be fucking really good. So there's one world where you keep him and it can absolutely work. He's one of the greatest players to ever come from Europe. So I will say it's really hard to sell players like that, because there's a world where you sell him as someone, they make a team around him that does work, and then he beats you and you think you're a dickhead because you sold him. Unless you sell him to NA, of course, but I get the feeling he's probably going to go to Europe just based on track record, etc. The other angle is if you sell him, right, here's the thing, kind of like what Wicked said there about like when they did it the other way around, where they let go of Tabs, but they didn't quite see what he brought to the team and they thought, well, Rekkles is better. I also think the player doesn't have to be as good as Rekkles to potentially make whatever the new G2 is good. Like, for example, if they just went, and again, I don't know what contracts they can actually get, but I suspect if you're in a smaller team, in the modern day, most teams, even if they don't want to sell you, will let you talk to the big teams, if it's like TSM or G2 or something, because they kind of know it's like maybe your once in a lifetime chance, and they know if you get a big money offer, maybe it's worth selling, right? So I will say, I don't think people like Upset are available, unfortunately, because even though like in the past he would have joined in an instant, I looked it up, he signed to like 2023, and I don't know if you know this, but I suspect Fnatic doesn't want their players talking to G2. So instead, I would say the angle is you should probably be trying to get someone like Patrick, seems like the sorts of players, it's probably going to be, if you replace someone right now, it probably has to be that level in my opinion. Maybe Sven comes back to Europe, I don't fucking know, I think it would have to be a little bit out of left field. So to me, if you do that move, you only do it like Rekkles was talking about. If the player, even though in theory they might be worse as an ADC, they have to bring something to the team that you want. So in this case, maybe you want an aggressive ADC, in which case Upset would be your man, right? Bring in Upset, put in a supportive top laner, now you've got another type of team. So I do think the good news if you're G2 is you're starting the off-season with still one of the best cores of talent, and it's basically up to you what direction you go. What about other players? We've only talked about Rekkles here. Wicked, if you had to remove a different player, who would be another player you'd think about?
So, I mean, I can just make it very simple, right? If I was G2, I'd keep Mickey X because he's crazy. He ins sometimes, but he's the perfect player I want in a support role. Yankas, his thing is still good. He's getting older. A lot of people can be like, he's too old now. I don't think it matters. I think he's amazing. Caps is great. He ins as well. But I think that's the perfect playstyles you want in those roles. Yes. And then top lane, if one steps up, you can keep him. If he doesn't, swap him out. Doesn't matter. Rekkles, I think you can keep, as I said earlier. But if the money is good enough, then I don't see a reason not to sell him to get somebody cheaper that can offer somewhat the same. Or even like a different kind of playstyle with same results, right?
Do you have any players that are coming to mind for, in this case, you've obviously picked potentially top and ADC. Do you have any players that you would like to see in the team if they could join? Obviously, don't go ridiculous, like Nagori's not joining, like it has to be within reason, of course.
I mean, if I could choose any players I'd want, I'd probably do Adam and Sven. You mentioned Sven earlier. I think Sven is amazing. I think he's like crazy good at the game. He's been all the time. And I mean, Adam, I think is upcoming talent who plays aggressive, which is exactly what this team needs. So I think that would be perfect. And you
By
can
the
also
way,
take up Sven if you wanted
one
to.
of the reasons I even picked Sven as well is I just think, if people don't know, like, Sven obviously does want to be in a team that's like fucking ADC dominant, and mate, he would love playing with Mickey X. And all, it's funny, this just shows how fans never get it with certain players. Those two players, Hillesang and Mickey X, they can only ever be overrated or underrated, apparently. Because what happens is when they're really good, their teams, everyone's like, they're impossible. They're just purely the absolute best. Then if their team does badly, they're like, cut this fucking guy. But it's like, dude, both of those players, it's like, they would have to be really bad before I'd ever consider cutting either of those players. Like, I think they're just so fucking sick for like they're so overqualified to be support players in terms of how good their hands are. Like, they really are the only players I've ever seen from the West that I thought were on the level of like the sick Asian supports that can do all the like bonkers plays, you know? They're the only ones that I think ever really met that bar. So I would never kick that Mickey X unless he like legit tanks. And my problem with this one is I find it hard to judge him because I don't feel like he ever matched Rekkles either, unfortunately. So I feel like I don't like it's hard to know who was fucking up in that lane. Spoods, which players would you replace, and or do you have any names you'd like to put in?
So I think first of all, please do not speak of Adam joining G2. It hurts my Fnatic fan heart. But I would.
By the way, if Adam actually does join G2 at this point, just for your own health, everyone out there, just stop being a Fnatic fan. I know exactly. Like, it's going to be really depressing at this point if it happens again. But yeah, I get your point. Okay.
Yeah, but I would agree with replacing Wonder. I think Rekkles being replaced again, I'm whatever. Like, it would be, I wouldn't agree, but at the same time I wouldn't disagree, right? I feel like Wonder, unless he really steps up, it's just really difficult to justify him remaining on this roster for a longer while. I think that if you get a more aggressive top laner going into 2022 for G2, the likes of Armored maybe, but I think his contract expires in like 2023, I believe, as well. So it will probably just be someone from the ERLs. I don't really have any names, unfortunately. I think you keep the core, you keep Jankos. I agree that he's still really good. I think you keep Caps and you, I don't know, put a gun to his head and say, okay, you gotta start playing a little bit better, buddy. And you keep Mickey X, because I also agree that if you are fortunate enough to have Mickey X and Hillesang on your team, you just keep them until they die, I guess.
Also, I just looked it up now. Even though, like I said, obviously the org might not want to sell him. I looked it up. Actually, the players, and this is mad, that do have their contract end this year in Mad Lions is the bot lane, both of them. Now, here's the problem, though. I've just told you I wouldn't kick Mickey X. So the problem is, even though I do think Kaiser's amazing, right, in that scenario, I'd only be recruiting Kazi, right? Listen, no disrespect to Kazi, but that's like saying, yeah, I'll have the hot dog, hold the fucking sausage. Not hating, you know. Dude, Kaiser is the fucking sausage in that scenario. Like, if anything, I want him done. So I don't know. Listen, unless Mickey X, can you play ADC? There's my other question if I'm Carlos. Like, let's make the God bot lane where everyone knows how to make plays. No, that's the problem. I don't think there's many. The funny thing is, though, that one thing I will add in is G2 has a factor no one else has, which is, first of all, as I said, most teams will at least let the player take the meeting because they just feel like it's mean not to. I don't, by the way. I personally think what Carlos did technically is correct. If you own the guy's contract and he's not a free agent, you can tell him, no, I'd rather you played for me. Guess what? That's why I fucking signed you, dickhead. Sit down. So you were actually entirely legally obliged to do that. But most of them try to play the like nice guy card and let them talk to him. The problem they have is this. There is a world, by the way, where in theory you could get Mad Lions players in a G2. It's just if G2 is willing to just overspend, basically. Because I'll tell you, if they come and they basically say, I'll pay you 2 times what I should pay, I'm sorry, most teams will take that unless they really like, because I know fans are going to go, but Mad Lions is the best. Yeah, but the org isn't in the same position. That's what you don't understand. The point is the G2 org is way bigger than the Mad Lions org. So if they offer, like, so remember, with the money they've made from some of their deals, they could legitimately be like, we'll give you like $3 million for like fucking Kaiser or something. Like, there's a lot of teams that'll just say yes. They'll just say, listen, for $3 million, I'll get like the next best player and pocket $2 million of it. Like, that's an easy deal to make. And by the way, Mad Lions, again, like I say, they're not the strongest org financially. So unfortunately, they might cap out in that regard. Probably depends how Mad Lions does at Worlds, I would imagine, on that one. Maybe if the group stage eliminate, it can happen. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.